Welcome to an edition of DT Live, a rare live stream from me, mainly because I don't record from my house very often these days. In the last year and a half, of course, I have my office where I typically do all of my pre-recorded videos, and the internet, although it's not terrible at that office, live streaming is always kind of sketchy. So I've pretty much quit doing live streaming from my office where I typically record. And but the internet at my house is fine, so recording from home today. I hope everybody is doing good. For those of you hanging out in the YouTube chat, there's a bunch of you already here early in the stream. Let me know how the audio is. Give me a yay or a nay on the audio. I am not previewing the stream audio myself, even though I have these earbuds in. These earbuds actually would not connect to my audio interface, the Scarlett 2i2. It has a jack for headphones, but it's the big jack, and I do have some headphones I could go grab to plug in to actually monitor the audio, but I'm too lazy to get out of this chair now that I'm here. Yay on the audio. And everybody actually said yay. I was surprised. Usually you got that one clown that says Paru. Arch Linux joke there for those of you using Ubuntu. All right. Let me check off the chat here before some of the yays. I can't go back too far in the chat because it disappears after a while, but some of you guys were here, about an hour or so early. Yeah, some folks were complaining about the time zones, obviously. It is 2 p.m. here in the central time zone here in the U.S., and typically my once-a-month live stream that I do with my patrons, I do at 10 a.m., so I pushed it back later in the afternoon just to have a little bit of a different time, which I know this afternoon time in the U.S. is pretty bad for those, especially in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East. I get that. It's starting to get quite late. But again, I was trying to switch it up just a little bit than the typical time I do. Because the 10 a.m. time obviously doesn't work for many people. I know people in Australia, for example, hate the 10 a.m. time because there's no way they could be here for it. We're pushing it back to 2 p.m. here. At least gives some of the Australians a chance to check out the stream, assuming they got up quite early. Myself, I'm an early bird, so I typically get up about 6 a.m., usually between 6 and 7 a.m. every day. Yes, 12:32 a.m., 2200 hours in Europe, Eastern Europe here, yeah. So some of you guys stayed up a little later to check this out. Now, homesick today, says HipDad. Well, that is unfortunate. Let me grab a browser here. To the desktop here. Let's see what we've got going on here. I know some of you were excited about the channel passing the 200K mark on YouTube, which was nice. Just a nice milestone. Doesn't mean much other than it's a nice round number. And I'm getting really close to 50K on Odyssey, which I'm quite proud of. To have that many on Odyssey, I mean, think about it. About a quarter of the people that subscribe to me subscribe on Odyssey. That's an achievement. Again, because, you know, it's not YouTube, right? It's an alternative platform, so that's a nice achievement. Another interesting milestone for the channel here, just a couple of days ago, this video here passed the 1 million view mark, how to be a Linux user. Matter of fact, 2 days ago, it passed the 1 million mark. It actually is now 1.1 million, so it got an additional 100,000 views just in the last 2 days. I don't know why YouTube is pushing this video this much. This video here, I mean, it's a under 3-minute video, and it did take a little effort to put this video together as far, you know, putting the montage of pictures together and a little bit of music. but it was a rather quick and simple video I kind of threw together quickly. And for some reason, of all the videos, one that I didn't put much effort in at all, YouTube is pushing this thing, and the ones that you spend hours or even days sometimes working on, they don't get any views. That is the nature, though, of video content creation and the life of a YouTuber, right? At 4 p.m. here in Argentina. Very nice, yeah. Well, everybody in North and South America should be good. So it should be afternoon for everyone on those continents. So a lot more people letting me know the time. Yeah. Kyle says YouTube is dying. I don't see it dying. Now, will YouTube eventually die? Yeah. I do think some of the way it treats both the content creators on the platform and the way it treats the people that actually consume those videos, you guys, the viewers, they don't treat any of us well, right? There's definitely issues with the platform, and that may eventually catch up to them. Right now, I don't see that happening, but it certainly could very soon. Yeah, GNU lecture says the programming sucks still. Simple as that. Yeah. Well, one of the things with, viral videos, you can't really plan to make a viral video. I know a lot of content creators try, but it's one of those things. You never know what will catch on, and of course, you'll never know what YouTube wants to promote. But what you can do just to get the most views on any video you make, and I've mentioned this before, but those of you that want to get into eventually making your own video content, spend some time thinking about a thumbnail. Because the thumbnail is really what draws views. Because honestly, how to be a Linux user, and it's a 3-minute video, just the generic title, I mean, you don't really know what that video is going to be about. It really doesn't suck you in, right? But you got to put something on the thumbnail, something interesting, something like, okay, what the hell is this video about? And once somebody asks themselves that, what the hell is this video about? Typically, they're going to click on it, even if they don't watch but a few seconds, just to check it out. Just because, most of the thumbnails you see on YouTube, you can kind of figure out, I see what that video is about. I'm not interested. But if you can give them one that I really don't know what this is, people will check it out, even just if it's for a few seconds. Hello DT, did you add the Swedish Linux? I actually did. You will be in the credits for this stream. And he's talking about the patrons. Let me show a patron list here. Somewhere in the T's there is the Swedish Linux. I've got you. Now I must warn you, the next 2 or 3 videos of mine, I've already pre-recorded them. You're not in the credits on those, but you are in today's. So I do appreciate the subscription on Patreon. It always is a little weird updating the patrons list, because obviously I've got a lot of patrons and it's constantly changing. And it does take some work to keep that thing up to date. It kind of is time consuming. Because with Patreon, they give you like a spreadsheet list. You can download a spreadsheet of all your patrons and everything. But then trying to convert that into something that you can put into an OBS scene sometimes can be a little tricky, right? So, and then of course sorting out the names alphabetically and by tier, it can be a real challenge. Got some super chats here, so let me go ahead and catch up on this before I miss some of the super chats. Barry Scott Gaming, he says, hey DT, where do I buy a pet Russian dolphin? I have no idea what that is or what that is even supposed to mean, but I appreciate the super chat. I'm sure that is some kind of meme or something I should know about, but I live a sheltered life and I don't hang out on social media, so I'm lost on that one. Nate Pick, He writes in, any suggestions on small projects to do in Emacs to get used to scripting, besides Hello World? Love the content, by the way, helped me move to Linux. So if you're just looking for some simple bash scripting, yeah, I have done a lot of videos on making especially D-menu scripts using bash, and they're very simple stuff. Just follow along some of my videos. Let me switch over to the desktop. I think I have a playlist. If I go to playlist, and you go to my video, my channel page, go to playlist. I've got a lot of playlists here, but one of them, shell scripting. And there's 7 videos in there. I'm sure I've done more stuff with shell scripting on video, but check out some of these. Because I've got some that just cover like basics of like if then else statements, variables, arrays, stuff like that. So check out that list. There's another list here that there might be some crossover in, DM scripts, which are my D menu scripts. It's actually a package, a program. It's actually packaged up in the Arch user repository, the AUR. It's also packaged up in the DTOS core repository, the DM scripts package. But you will see me actually create many of these scripts just on camera, like on the fly. Like I'm going to write a script today. And those are good videos because you just see somebody start with nothing and just create something, you know. And again, none of those videos am I doing anything really complicated with shell scripting. I'm just covering a lot of the basic, like, command line utilities. Sometimes I get into grep, sed, alt, cut, you know, things like that. Most of it, though, is, you know, if then else statements, case statements, and then, you know, piping what you need to pipe into a run launcher like dmenu or Rofi. What most of those videos are about. I've got some more super chats to catch up on. I do apologize. Let's see. It's not me, it's me. Sending a super chat. What was the last time you had to use Wine or a Windows VM? I never use Wine, and I never have to use a Windows VM. I haven't used Windows because I needed to use Windows in probably 15 years. When I quit Windows, I just quit and never went back. I don't have a legit copy of Windows. I haven't actually owned a computer of my own that ran Windows since Windows XP. I have never had a computer that ran Windows 7, or Vista, or 8, Windows 10, Windows 11. It's been a long time. I don't know much about Windows, to be honest. And Wine, again, because I don't really need to run Windows software, I don't use Wine, and Wine's kind of bad. If I had to run Windows software, and many of you guys I know do, just use a Windows VM. Wine can be a little iffy. You're going to run into a lot of programs that just don't function correctly in Wine. Where in a Windows VM, your programs are always going to work, right? Because it's essentially just Windows. So the VM, you're good. Wine, not necessarily. Ashlyn or something writes in, what distro do I put on my Pine phone? I just got it at my door. I don't know much about mobile phones. I don't know much about mobile phone operating systems. I'm not a phone person. I don't really like those devices. I don't like the idea of constantly having a computer on you, or camera or microphone constantly on you. I know that's a boomer take, but I don't really like phones. I think that actually has been damaging to humanity, to society in general, is the rise of cell phones. Is the fact that we feel like we all must be connected constantly, 24/7, 365. That's why I don't do much with phones. I really don't know anything about mobile phone operating system. I couldn't even begin to answer that, unfortunately, Ashlyn. I know there are many, though, forks of Android, free and open source forks that rip out a lot of the telemetry and, you know, all the Google parts. So, couldn't tell you their names, but I know they exist. Aaron sends in a super chat. Hey DT, I just want to thank you for reviving my interest in not only Linux but IT as a whole. I'm a 20-year on-again, off-again user of Linux and recently got back into it by watching a ton of your videos. Appreciate that, Aaron. And I am glad people are either becoming interested in Linux again or just becoming interested in Linux the first time. That is the point of the channel. That was the whole goal. And I have seen an explosion. And it's been, actually next month will be 5 years I started doing this channel. And in those 5 years, I have seen the growth of Linux really explode. You see so many more Linux content creators on YouTube, for example. So much more content about Linux, so many more articles about Linux. You see people just interested in Linux. So it's obvious that there's more interest and more users out there. Now, the numbers sometimes don't reflect it because we were such a small percentage before 5 years ago, right? Even though we have exploded in popularity, going from 2% to 3% market share on the desktop, for example, may not seem like a big deal, but heck, that's a 50% increase when you think about it. It's just, we didn't start with very many users, but we're getting there. A super chat from Amol Vidya. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. I do apologize, but he writes in, "Hey DT, why you bald, homie? I purposely knew somebody was going to ask that on this stream, and I needed to shave this morning, and I didn't. You know why? Because that's a full head of hair. A full head of black hair. Even though I'm 45 years old, there's a little gray along the sides if I let it grow out. And that's why I don't let my hair grow out, because I know it would make me look much older." That is the secret to actually looking a lot younger than what you actually are, is especially men. When you shave your head, you'd be surprised. Immediately, you'll look like 10, 15 years younger than you actually are, just from, especially once you start becoming a little gray. Just cut it all off. All right, I think I caught up on the super chats there. Yeah, this appears to have some hair growing. Yep. Yeah, bald is badass. Well, I do it because I'm cheap and I don't like paying for haircuts. Great. That's the only reason I started shaving my head. I started doing it many, many years ago, back when I was in college, because I was a broke college student, and I just did not want to pay, at the time, prices for a haircut, $12, $14 for a haircut or whatever. You might want to tip your barber as well, right? And, if you keep your hair kind of short, which is typically, I had long enough hair, I combed it or whatever, but it wasn't long hair. Typically I need to go get a haircut every, 3 or 4 weeks? And when you're broke, paying that money, that just seemed like a bad idea to me. That seemed like a bad financial investment. So I got my own electric clippers, and I just, buzz cut my hair. And that became a hassle, because that's messy. Just hair everywhere, all over the bathroom, or wherever it is you're cutting your hair. And I was like, you know what? Instead of just doing, shortening it with some clippers, keeping it short, it's like, why not just take it all the way down with a razor? And that was a lot less messy. And to be honest, a lot easier. The only expensive part with shaving your head is you have to make sure you get good razors. Never buy a cheap razor blade and think you're going to shave your head. You are going to wreck your face and your scalp with cheap razor blades. Actually, spend some money, buy something with a minimum of 4 blades. Touchant. DT, why don't you try Fedora? I have used Fedora many times. Yeah, I've been using Linux a long time. Check out the videos on the channel. I've probably installed a couple of hundred different distros before. As far as why don't I, you say don't try, why don't you try Fedora? Obviously, there's not much I haven't tried. You're asking why I don't use Fedora, is because I'm not using Fedora, but I have used Fedora. I've actually used Fedora briefly on my main production machine at my office to make videos. I actually did test out Fedora for, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks one point. This was 2, maybe 3 years ago. I didn't talk about it much on the channel because it really didn't matter. It was back when I used to hop. I try not to hop much, but I'd go a couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks, and then I'd change distros on that particular computer. I quit doing that because it got tiring to do that. Plus, sometimes you distro hop and things wouldn't work out quite correctly. But Fedora is great because all the software you need is in the repos. I never really had a problem creating videos. OBS and Kdenlive and GIMP and video drivers and all of that stuff just works just fine in Fedora. It's not a bad distro. I could certainly use Fedora for what I do if I needed to. I think I'm behind on the chat. I know there's probably a couple hundred people in the chat, and the chat is moving very fast. I do apologize. Obviously, I'm going to miss a lot of the questions in the chat, so we'll try keep up though. Hey DT, I just installed the Helix editor and love it. Have you ever used it? I think I did a video briefly trying out Helix. I think I did. I know I've tried it. I don't know if I tried it on camera. If I do a search for Helix, no, it doesn't look like I have. I think the reason I didn't do it on camera is because when I tried it, I think I had some issues with it. Like there were some bugs or something, and I don't like trashing pieces of free and open source software on camera. Now this was a while ago that I tried Helix. It wasn't like in the last couple of months or anything. It's been a few months. And like I said, I'm pretty sure it was buggy. That's why I didn't do it on camera, because I know I installed it. And I know I briefly looked at it. I just didn't do it on camera. I may eventually take a look at it on camera. The thing is, especially with newer projects that are free and open source, I don't want to give them bad press that's undeserved, So a lot of times if I try out something and it just doesn't work, either because it's alpha or beta quality software, or it may be great software, but it just doesn't work on my hardware or something like that, usually I'm not going to cover it on camera if I know it's going to not look good on video. Again, I don't want to throw unnecessary shade on some projects, but I will try Helix again in the near future because other people have asked about it. And a super chat from Mitty. He writes in, do you still suggest using CentOS? So, CentOS is kind of a dead project. It's technically not dead. You still got the what is it, CentOS stream going or whatever. But honestly, on a server, there's so many good server distributions. If you wanted an RPM server distribution like CentOS, I mean, there's Alma Linux, which I took a look at on camera not too long ago, and I was pretty impressed with Alma. There was Rocky Linux, which I haven't done on camera, but I know a lot of people like Rocky. Of course, you always got Red Hat out there as well, if you wanted to go that route. And if you're not really tied to the RPM ecosystem, I mean, Debian stable, right? Just Debian stable. Ubuntu LTS server is also really good. That's typically what I run most of the time these days. When I first got into Linux back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and I started making my own websites and running my own web servers, back then everybody was running Red Hat or Debian. And then shortly after, CentOS became very popular for being, that free Red Hat. And for years, most, servers that I'd spin up on the web, whatever hosting I was using, if they offered CentOS, that was always my go-to. And then eventually, I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, I've just found Ubuntu LTS just to be dead simple. That's my go-to. I know a lot of people, Ubuntu, but hey, they do make some things very easy. Make setting up a lamp stack very, very easy with their task cell program. They make setting up a Snap, or not a Nextcloud server very easy because of snaps. I know people hate snaps too, but man, you set up your lamp stack with Ubuntu, and you don't even have to set up the lamp stack on the Nextcloud server because it's all contained in the snap. Sudo snap install Nextcloud. Boom, you're done. That is one of the great things about snaps, is actually snaps are great on servers. Not so much on the desktop, right? A little slow on the desktop, a little annoying. but snaps really kind of were designed for servers and Internet of Things and stuff like that. For that, it's great. I got a super chat from WebTV 2022, and it is this weird purple character with the word cool on it. That's some kind of emoji or something. No comment or question, but that's fine. I do like the emoji. All right. Sabello, I love the Pop! OS workflow. Any window manager suggestions for a newbie? So if you like the Pop! OS workflow, I'm assuming you're using GNOME and you're probably using their tiling feature. If that's what you're talking about, you'd like kind of what the tiling is in Pop! OS, and you're now thinking about moving to a proper tiling window manager. Because honestly, Pop! OS, any of those tiling window managers based on GNOME or KDE, they're not proper tiling window managers in the traditional sense, because they don't handle workspaces the way a real tiling window manager does, or they don't handle multi-monitors the same way. It's just the nature of it, because they're still essentially fundamentally GNOME or KDE Plasma. But if you want to move to a tiling window manager, something that's easy to get into for a first tiling window manager, many people recommend i3. i3 is not my favorite tiling window manager, so typically I recommend people that are first-time tiling window manager users to try Awesome Window Manager. I've done videos about Awesome. I've done some videos about i3. Awesome is great for the new tiling window manager user, because Awesome comes with a panel already set up, comes with a menu system that's already set up. And it comes with floating windows out of the box, window decorations. Like you kind of have to actually configure it to be a tiling window manager. Out of the box, it assumes, though, that you're kind of a noob, which is nice. And then you gradually make it into that tiling window manager. Let's see. DT, how's the new Xmonad working out for you? It's great. Great. Xmonad 0.17 came out on Arch, 2 months ago? Had no issues with it. Had to change my config slightly. There were just a few changes. It took me seriously 10 minutes maybe to fix my config and get it pushed out to my GitLab. And it works. No bugs. So I wouldn't expect there to be any bugs, because it's been out a year. It just took Arch Linux a year to finally put it in the repos for some reason. Hey DT, is there a problem with Arch-based distros and Nvidia GPU drivers? I have a 3060 Ti. I have a 3060 in this machine, and I'm running Arch-based distro. He writes, any distro I use won't even boot as soon as I install the drivers. If you install the drivers, make sure you installed the right drivers. Now with Nvidia, there are two sets of drivers. You have the Nvidia drivers, and then you have the Nvidia LTS drivers, and that depends on what kernel you install. If you install the LTS kernel, so if you install the kernel Linux-LTS, you need to install the Nvidia LTS drivers to go with that kernel. If you mix them up and install the regular Nvidia drivers with the LTS kernel, or vice versa, yeah, it won't boot. So check that and just make sure you have the right driver installed. Let's see. Afri P, he writes in, which books, manuals, websites, courses, or any resources can help me gain experience developing SysAdmin skill sets through completing tasks? I'm studying for RHCSA and getting a first job in IT. So I have never worked in system administration or IT ever. I don't work with computers, never had a job in that industry. So I really can't speak on that from I've never worked in that industry. I will say that as far as books, there are several good books out there. One of my favorites is the Command Line Bible. That will actually teach you a lot of the basics as far as the command line, the core utils, the standard GNU core utils that you'll use all the time. It may get into some of how to use like the basic functions of VI or Vim, because obviously you'll need to know a little bit about that. So I would check out the Command Line Bible. I can't think of any other books off the top of my head. Most of the books that I have that are Linux related are actually at my office and not here at my house. As far as websites, courses, any other resources, I can't tell you about websites, but I will say as far as video content, there is a lot of good stuff on YouTube. And by a lot of good stuff, I mean there are actually IT professionals that have YouTube channels. They're not typically focusing necessarily strictly on Linux content, free and open source software and stuff, the kind of content I do, but there are a lot of people, for example, that just cover like networking and IT and stuff like that. There's plenty of those channels out there. So I would check some of that out. For somebody that is a professional as far as system administration and IT, works in the tech industry, Keep It Techie sends a super chat. If you guys are not subscribed to Keep It Techie, check out that channel. He writes in, congrats on reaching 200 KDT. This is awesome. Hope all is well. Well, Josh, I am great because, of course, the Saints won this past Sunday. Josh, one of my fellow Louisiana brothers, Jameis Winston brought my Saints back. They were down 16 points in the fourth quarter. And then at the end, famous Jameis, he lit up the Falcons, scored 2 touchdowns and a field goal in the fourth quarter to win the game. I'm feeling pretty good. Pretty psyched about this NFL season, Josh. I hope you are too. S. Wagner writes in, hey DT, thanks a lot for your Emacs content. After some hard weeks, I can say that it starts to make my life much more easy and productive. Yeah, you do have to put in some time, right? It's not something that you're just going to jump in and it all makes sense right away. And that's one of the things with Emacs, especially Emacs content on YouTube. Well, there's people that actually just focus on nothing but Emacs. There's Emacs specific channels on YouTube, and those guys do a great job. Where you find problems with video content about Emacs is sometimes you have people who just try out Emacs or just dabble in it for a few days and then show it to you on video, and those people are typically having a bad time in Emacs because they hate it and they can't understand it, because it does take some weeks to get into. It's one of those things. Don't even start with Emacs unless you're going to devote some time. I would say you'd need, probably a month or two before it kind of clicks as far as the workflow and, just what Emacs actually is. It's going to take you some time because it's such a different thing, right? Because Emacs is not, let me actually switch to my desktop. Emacs is not one of these things where typically people are used to this kind of workflow where you open a terminal and you start with a terminal. And from a terminal, you do all of your stuff, whatever command line stuff, and you need to edit something, you'll go into Vim and you'll do whatever in Vim and you make all your edits and you quit out of Vim to get back to the command line. This is your workflow, right? Where Emacs is a different kind of workflow because you don't start by opening a terminal, right? If you need a terminal, you can get a terminal, but you start by just opening up Emacs, right? And then inside Emacs, right, you can do pretty much anything you want. Because if I want to edit something, I can edit something, right? If I want a terminal, well, I can get a terminal. I could just, I could do a meta X here, and I've got vterm installed here, don't I? Nope. I have just the regular term. It says cannot open. I may need to create an interactive vterm buffer. Why is that not? Well, I know one that will work. The eShell. Yeah, I know why it won't work. I was going to demonstrate some Emacs workflow. I updated my system right before this stream. I did not reboot after I updated. I think that's going to be the problem. I think I need a reboot. Or actually, I know what I could do. It's not the reboot that's the problem. Let me kill Emacs, kill that old Emacs process that was running. Because I run the Emacs client, right? The Emacs server. And now, let's restart it with the updated version of Emacs, right? And now, see if I can launch the eShell. It does not look like I can. Yeah, now I can't even launch any Emacs, yeah. Well, that is the way it goes. For those of you that were here before the stream, about 15 or 20 minutes before the stream, I had 540 updates available to take on my system. And I actually asked some people that were hanging out in the chat, I was like, should I take this update right before the stream? I said, what could go wrong? So I took the update. I did not reboot the computer because I wasn't that sure how the update would go. I didn't want to reboot and then have some issues, some driver issues or kernel panic. You never know what could happen. But apparently, I broke my Emacs. Or at least I broke the Emacs client. I wonder if I just did standard Emacs without the client, would it launch? Nope. Looks like my config is broken. Here's Emacs without the server. An error occurred while loading init.el. I'll fix that off camera. Let's see. XP911X. Thank you, DT. Thank you, sir. Or madam. I don't know if it's male or female, right? I just assume everybody is typically male because actually my analytics tell me my audience is like 97% male. Just the nature of Linux. It's actually just the nature of tech. For some reason, it's just all men. One of the unfortunate parts of the tech industry, we need more women. And of course, a lot of it isn't just any kind of barrier to entry, like people preventing women from getting in the tech industry. It's actually trying to get more women interested in tech. We just need more. We need more females, right? Right now, the tech industry, I mean, it's a sausage party, and that's no fun, right? Nobody wants that. Fabian writes in, thanks for the Vim tutorials. I always find myself using them as a solid reference. Appreciate that. All right, I think I caught up, at least on the super chats. Since I'm caught up on that. Let's see what we can do about the Emacs. Let me try to launch the Emacs daemon. It says, oh, well, that's why. The Emacs daemon is not running. Doom is in an incomplete state. Run Doom sync. Let's rebuild my Doom Emacs config. And of course, you guys don't want to watch these packages build, right? Doom Emacs is rebuilding a bunch of packages. But I'm going to have a fully functional Doom Emacs here in a minute. Let's see, VI, Vim over Emacs. If you know what, I'm not going to fight anybody that wants to tell me that Vim is better than Emacs, because I like them both. I won't argue with you. I won't tell you you're crazy. But anybody that tells me VI is better than Emacs, anybody that tells me VI is better than any other editor on the planet, we're gonna have an argument. I'd rather use Microsoft's Notepad than VI. Let's be real here. I know I'm going to get flamed in the comments for that, but it's kind of a joke, but it was just a little joke. I'm almost serious about that. DistroTube, what window manager do you use? Mostly Xmonad. Sometimes you'll see me in different things. I've got about 15 different window managers installed on my system. Most of the time you see me in Xmonad, and that's what I'm using today is Xmonad. Which Xmonad had to update when I updated my system, so I hope it recompiles correctly. Should I try that on camera? Of course, if it didn't recompile correctly and I try to restart Xmonad, it's going to crash my running session here and kill the stream. I might do it anyway. Why not? Live dangerously. I'm going to wait for Doom Emacs to finish compiling before I do that, though, because I don't want to interrupt this process just in case I do get a crash. By the way, I know people say Arch Linux and Arch Linux-based distributions are unstable, and I know sometimes I make it look unstable. It's actually not that bad. For example, this issue I had with Doom Emacs, this was not a real issue, right? Emacs had an update, right? So I needed to recompile some packages against my existing Doom Emacs config. Nothing was broke. It's just something you have to do occasionally. Shwayam Shri writes in, better to shave than show the grays. Whenever we go out, my girlfriend gets carded, but not me, even though she's 10 years older than me, just because I have some gray. Question, Texas barbecue or Carolina barbecue? P.S. Love your videos. Well, obviously, I'm kind of partial to Texas barbecue just because I'm much closer to Texas being in Louisiana, right? It's practically next door neighbors, right? So I spent a lot of time in Texas. And even barbecue here in Louisiana is, Texas style barbecue, right? I don't think I've ever been to the Carolinas. At least I don't think I have. If I have, I was probably just driving through it, but I don't think I've ever been in either North or South Carolina. Mitchell writes in, I usually just lurk these days, but I want to say congrats on the 200K. Let's go for 300K. Cheers. Appreciate that, Mitchell. Other than the unstable factor, is Arch Linux good for a home server? Sure. Yeah, and again, what you do at home, I mean, is it unstable? You'll get constantly updated packages, and yeah, there may be some small breakage, but if it's stuff you're just playing around with, what does it matter? Now, on actual production servers that actually matter, would I ever run Arch Linux on a server? Heck no, right? I'm going Debian stable, Ubuntu LTS, CentOS, or one of the related CentOS clones, right? We're not doing rolling release on a server that actually needs to be stable. Let's see, what Linux is good for stupid people? I like the question. He writes in, I'm intellectually challenged and Ubuntu is too hard. Well, the problem is all Linux distros are essentially the same. I mean, sometimes the installation process, that 15 minutes to an hour to get it installed and up and running can be different. But once they're up and running, they're all basically the same. So, yeah, if you're struggling with Ubuntu, you're going to struggle with all of them. Because under the hood, they're all running the same programs, right? It's all the same kernel, same drivers, the same GNU core utilities. Mostly the same desktop environments, unfortunately, especially for the bigger, more popular distributions. Most of them are running GNOME, which is unfortunate. But even if they're not running GNOME, most of them are running a GTK-based desktop. Typically something that looks and functions similar to GNOME or was a fork of one of the old GNOMEs. So yeah, if you're struggling with Ubuntu, I really couldn't tell you. Like if Ubuntu, you say you're struggling just intellectually wrapping your head around some of the stuff it does, I mean, I could tell you to try something else. I mean, go try Linux Mint. It's a different desktop environment, but that might be good. Because honestly, the Cinnamon desktop environment that Mint uses is probably a little easier, especially for a new user, than the GNOME desktop environment, which is what Ubuntu uses. So maybe give Linux Mint a try. DT, do you use WSL? I like WSL. That's him writing that. I have never used WSL. I don't use Windows. I haven't used. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the stream. People were asking me about something Windows related. I don't have Windows. I don't know anything about Windows. I haven't used Windows in a long, long time. So I have no need for WSL. I guess if I installed Windows and kept Windows around, maybe in a virtual machine, I don't know. I don't know if it'd be worth me keeping Windows around just for me to play with WSL. I mean, I have shells in Linux. I have the bash shell. If and WSL is one of those things that is great. It's out there for people that have to have it or need it because you have to use Windows machines. I'm just not in a place where I need it. So. DT, thoughts on the HP Dev 1 laptop with Pop! OS? I don't know anything about that laptop personally because I don't own it. As far as, I like... HP has always kind of been cool with Linux. As a company, HP has always supported Linux. Hardware for HP, even going back 15, 20 years ago, HP was actually making printers that worked on Linux way before a lot of other companies were. And that was back when printing was necessary. Everybody had a printer, but most printers didn't work on Linux. HP was supporting Linux. So I love HP as a company. Their computers, they've always offered, I know for at least the last decade or more, they've offered computers with Ubuntu on it and Pop! OS. I think they may have even done some computers with Fedora on it at one point. I could be wrong about that, but HP as a company I really like, just for the fact that they have always supported Linux. So I like buying their products. Typically when I go and I need a piece of equipment, if I needed a new printer, I'd buy an HP printer, or if I needed a new external SSD drive, and there's an HP brand one available, I'll buy it, right? I like to support the companies that support us, right? I hope everybody does that. Those companies that obviously just thumb their nose at Linux, companies like Adobe. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Don't spend money with them unless you really have to, right? I understand some people have to support some of these companies because of school or work, but those companies that just want to ignore Linux or pretend like it doesn't exist, you know what? You should return the favor. Pretend like those companies don't exist and don't give them your money. Let's see. Got a question here from Adramino. I probably mispronounced that. DT, I'm making a Linux distro based off of shell scripting. What's your opinion on that? That's fine. That doesn't tell me too much. I mean, you're making a distro based off of shell scripting. Shell scripting is a part of every Linux distribution. Most of like the core stuff on every distribution, there's system scripts that run on everything. If you're talking about you're building maybe like an installation script based around shell scripting, or some of your own custom applications based on shell scripting, yeah, that's not that uncommon either. Obviously, on Linux, the bash shell is pretty much installed on every Linux distribution. So bash scripting has always been kind of the scripting language on Linux. I mean, even with the popularity of things like Python, Python is very popular. Typically, if you can, you script with bash. And if it's something where bash doesn't make sense because of the size of the project, then, you step it up to something like Python or whatever scripting language you want to use. What are your thoughts on the lack of software on Linux? I use a blood glucose meter and I need a C++ driver that is only written for Windows and Mac OS. It stops me using Linux. What are your thoughts on the lack of software on Linux? There's nothing anybody can do about that, and that's from Guy writes in there. That's not a Linux problem, and there's nothing Linux can do about it. One of the things with software that doesn't run on Linux, that's actually not something that Linux can make happen. The problem is the person that writes that driver for that piece of equipment. They chose to write a driver specifically for Windows, and in this case, for 2 operating systems, one for Windows, one for Mac. They decided they didn't need to write a driver for Linux. They're the only ones that can write a driver, though, because I guarantee you, with 99.9% certainty, it's probably proprietary software, that driver, which means nobody has access to the source code. Nobody can look at the source code. Nobody can write a driver other than that company. If they've decided they don't want to support Linux, that's it. It'll never happen. That's not. It's a Linux problem in that it affects the Linux community, but it's also not a Linux problem, and there's literally nothing we can do about it. Right? That's one of the things about those of you that have software that you need, and there is not a Linux port of that software. Write the company, or get on their forums or tweet at them or whatever to actually make a Linux version. Start a petition. Sometimes you can get some traction with that. Sometimes you can't. I can tell you with really small niche pieces of software, it's usually not worth their time, unfortunately, to make a Linux port of their software. Because if it's a really niche piece of software that not too many people out there use anyway, I mean, even the Windows audience for that software is really, really small. Think about how small the Linux audience would be, the Linux market share for. So, yeah. But really popular pieces of software, like the Adobe suite, man, there's, probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Linux users that would pay for Adobe software for like Photoshop on Linux. So it'd be worth it for them to port their tools to Linux. If they weren't a-holes. I'm bashing on Adobe a lot today. I need to stop. Let me drink my root beer. Yes, it's early in the day, so just a root beer, not the real hard beer yet. Plus, I've had a lot of coffee today, and this particular root beer, Shasta, is caffeine free. I didn't need any more caffeine. Hey DT, what do you think about blockchain integration with a Linux? With a Linux distro? I don't have any thoughts on that at all, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what that would mean. Blockchain integration with a Linux distribution. All right, back to my desktop and Doom Emacs now that we recompiled everything. So the way I was getting back to the difference between a standard workflow that most people are used to before they get into Emacs. Your workflow typically involves opening a terminal, right? Doing some commands, whatever those commands happen to be. And then, you're going to have to eventually edit some files. You'll edit some text in VI or Vim or Nano. Then after you're done, you're back at the command line in the terminal, right? Everything starts and ends with a terminal. You're always in this terminal, where it's different in Emacs. In Emacs, you just open up Emacs, right? You go ahead and navigate to a text file if you actually want to edit text. If that's not what you want to do, then if I need a terminal, I can open a terminal. I got to compile it. In this case, vterm, because of that update. But there's my terminal, right? I'm done with this terminal, I hit escape here to get back into normal mode because I'm using evil mode, right? And then I could do Control WC to close that split. Get into the E shell. The E shell, which is Emacs, its own shell, written mostly in Emacs Lisp, but it does a lot of the same functions. A lot of the standard GNU core utils work, even though they're not really the standard GNU core utils. This ls function that I just ran was written in Emacs Lisp, I'm assuming. But the E shell is great because being Emacs Lisp and built into Emacs itself, unlike things like vterm and some of the other terminal emulators built into Emacs, they have to have a shell that runs in them. So when I launch vterm, if I didn't have it configured, it's going to ask me, hey, what shell do you want to run inside vterm? You can't just launch your terminal without having a shell run inside it. What do you want to run? Bash, fish, ZSH? And I can tell it. Well, if you're running Emacs on Windows, then what are you going to do? There's no bash on Windows, right? You don't have to worry about that with the E shell, right? The E shell just works. Cross-platform, doesn't matter. Windows, Linux. Hey DT, have you ever done Linux from scratch? What are your thoughts on it? I have not. I've downloaded the manual before, but I haven't installed it. Mainly because I'm just not that interested. Just because, for the most part, I can read a manual. I know I can install it, right? I can install anything. I've always been one of those people. I can follow instructions and type things at the command line. But it takes a long time for everything to compile, and at the end of the day, and then after you're done, you don't really have a working distribution. I mean, no package manager or anything to it. People don't install Linux from scratch and then actually use it. It's mainly just an educational experience. And I just haven't been. It doesn't interest me. I know I've had a lot of people ask me to do it just to record it, put it on video so you guys can watch it. That would be such mind-numbingly boring content, though. That I haven't done it. I think a lot of people, though, ask for these things, even though they wouldn't watch it. Like I've had so many people, over the 5 years or so doing this stuff. Hey, can you install Arch Linux? I've installed Arch on camera so many times. I probably installed Arch Linux on camera. I've even done it on live streams 20 times, at least a dozen times, right? On pre-recorded videos, live streams, and people still ask for an Arch Linux install. It's like, why? You've seen me install it. The process really doesn't ever really change. I've done it enough. Hell, I can practically install Arch Linux without reading the wiki. Now I've done it enough times. But people are like, well, it's hard. You might make a mistake. Yeah, I might, but I'll still get it installed. Right? People love asking about Gentoo installs because they imagine Gentoo is such a difficult distribution to install. You're going to get frustrated and you're going to throw a fit on camera, and I'm going to be there to watch it and laugh at you, DT. I've installed Gentoo on camera many times. Yeah, right. And you've never gotten that out of me yet. But people imagine, a lot of people imagine that some of these more minimal distributions are a lot more difficult than they are. To be honest, anyone can install Gentoo. And I'm not joking. Anyone. Unless you're just a complete idiot. And I'm talking about to the point where you can't follow instructions, read, and do a copy and paste. Copy from the wiki, paste into the command line, right? If you can't do that, then yeah, I guess you can't install Gentoo. But everyone else, trust me, if you can follow a recipe, for baking a cake or something, right? You can follow the recipe to install something like Arch or Gentoo. No problem. Only problem with Gentoo is Gentoo actually does take a while. Where Arch, everything is pre-built binaries. When you're installing from Pacman, it's all binary, so it's just quick, right? Every package, a couple hundred packages takes like a minute. Where on Gentoo, everything has to compile, right? And that compiling takes hours. And that sucks. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. That's why I don't do Linux from scratch either, because it's even worse than Gentoo, because you start from an earlier starting point than where Gentoo starts at. Because the standard Gentoo install everybody does, it's like a stage 4 install, meaning there's a lot that's already been done before you ever get to installing Gentoo, right? Many people don't realize there was a lot of work done already, even before you spent 8 hours installing Gentoo. Just the ISO that you got from the Gentoo guys has already got a lot of work done for you. Where Linux from scratch, you literally start from the beginning. And depending on your equipment, depending on your hardware, it could take you days, maybe even a week or two to install Linux from scratch if you're doing on a really underpowered machine or in a weak VM that you can't give much CPU to. It's going to take a long time for all that stuff to compile. Not hard, you're going to read the manual, but you're just going to wait a long time. Super chat again from Ashlyn or something. I'd love to see you spend a month in Mageia 8. Yeah, I'm not going to spend, like on my main machines, I'm not going to hop. I'm not going to live in another distro. There's no reason to. I know I could use Mageia, and I'd be just fine in it. I'd be hopping for no reason, right? I'm not sure what you'd get out of it, right? Now, I've been strictly a Linux user on the desktop for 15 years, and I've run a lot of distributions on equipment. I've run a lot of distributions. We're not counting the hundreds that I've run in virtual machines, but I probably have used, I don't know, 20 or 30 on main production equipment. My workstations, my desktops. That's not including the laptops that sometimes I test stuff out on. That number is probably closer to 50 if I include laptops. And they're all the same, right? At some point, once you've tried out enough Linux distributions, you start realizing they're all the same. Once they're installed, they're all the same. Literally, it's the same kernel, the same GNU core utils. It's all the same. The only difference between distributions, if you're a desktop environment user, because some distributions customize their desktop environments, that stuff can be different. Ubuntu's GNOME is different than Fedora's GNOME, right? For example, Manjaro's Plasma Edition is different than OpenSUSE's Plasma Edition. But here's the thing, I'm not a desktop environment user. I use window managers. I use my own window manager configs, my desktop environment essentially. So no matter what distribution I go to, I'm going to install the window managers I want to use with my configs, and they're always going to be 100% exactly the same. If I installed Mageia and you looked at my desktop, it would look exactly like my desktop looks right now on Arco Linux, because it's going to be the same software with the same configs. That's why typically I do my distro reviews, which aren't reviews, they're first looks. I do an installation and first look when these distributions release. It's because I think that makes sense. Just taking a look as it is out of the box, it doesn't make sense. You guys want me to live in something for a month, 3 months, 6 months. There's no reason for me to ever do that, because I can't actually give you a review after that, because it's no longer that person's distribution. I've done hacked it to hell. Right? It's no longer Mageia at that point. It's essentially DT's operating system, right? I'm not talking about my DTOS script, but in this case, Mageia. I would have just stripped everything out that I didn't like about Mageia and made it my own. Or if I come back in 6 months and, hey, let me show you Mageia. That's not really Mageia at that point. That's me at that point. That's why I don't do those. I don't think there's much value in that. I know people disagree. A lot of people see no value in doing like an immediate first impression kind of video of a new release. They think those are lame, and that you should actually spend time in it. They might have a point with that too, but I definitely don't think living in something, especially for a long time, and then trying to review it as if that's still the distro. That doesn't make any sense. Unless you just never changed anything. Which some people, I guess, could be like that. I'm definitely not like that, though. ADT, have you seen Glorious Egg Rolls distro Nobara? Wonder if you had seen it or thoughts. I love it for gaming and just upkeep he does. I have not, and that was a super chat from John. I've actually never heard of Nobara. I am going to open up some notes here in Emacs where I jot down things. I'm going to make a note of that. Nobara. I might check that out. Somebody else asked me to check something else. Oh, the Helix editor. Somebody asked about earlier, which I have looked at off camera a few months back, and I had some issues with it. I'm going to take a look at it again. If it works for me, as far as it, it's not buggy or anything, I may actually do something on camera with that at some point as well. But yeah, thanks for letting me know about Nobara. I'll check that out. Let's see, Average Mamuel. Super chat. Thanks for all the work you do. Lunch is on me. Hey, I appreciate that, buddy. It's past lunchtime here, but later I'm going to go grab me a beer. The beer will be on you. I think I missed a super chat earlier, though. Yeah, I skipped somebody here. Let me scroll back. I know we got a lot of people in the chat. I do apologize. Daniel sends a super chat. Hey, DT, can you elaborate more about digital privacy? People should give up on this argument. I have nothing to hide, and the Linux role helping on that. So the whole argument that, and you do hear this when people talk about privacy, or especially being anonymous on the internet, or being anonymous with payments, or trying to keep some kind of anonymity, email, chat, whatever it happens to be. A lot of people are like, well, you got to put your name to it. We need to know everything that's being sent by everybody, because if you're not doing anything wrong, you've got nothing to hide. Well, that's not a legit argument. It's never been a legit argument. That's just people being flippant, or just dismissive, or people that are in a position where they don't have to worry about things. It's one of those things. A lot of people are in a comfortable place in life, as far as they're not persecuted, they're not under attack, or the nation you live in is doesn't see a lot of strife, as far as it's harmonious, as far as no tension between various ethnic groups or religious groups. This will vary from depending on who you talk to, because obviously I have a global audience. So, one of the things when we talk about these things, you can tell a lot about where the person lives sometimes with the answers they give. People that are in really comfortable positions, they often don't worry about this kind of stuff. And that people that, for example, are in a poverty-stricken third world country that's currently run by some totalitarian dictator, and they live under fear every day, gangs run the streets, things like that. Those kinds of people have different takes on a lot of this stuff. So that's just the nature of it. I don't get mad at those kinds of people that have that take. Oh, if you have nothing to hide, you don't have to worry about anything. Because I understand why these people often say that stuff. One of these things, you don't want to get mad. You don't want to ever take things personal. Don't take things personally. That sometimes you disagree with people, or maybe it's not even just disagreement. These people are flat out wrong. These people that talk about if you have nothing to hide, you don't have anything to worry about, right? Those people are 100% flat out wrong. But at the same time, don't get mad at them, right? You have to understand why they say the things they say. You gotta kind of understand the other side too. This is something people often can't do on social media, like Twitter, for example. I always hate on Twitter. That's why I can't be on Twitter. It's because Twitter promotes this idea where if you disagree with the other side of any argument, then you have to destroy them. Right? Like, no. Now, that's not the way it works in real life. But some people think Twitter is real life. Actually, some people bring Twitter into real life these days, and I think that's kind of sad. Let's see. Had a super chat I missed here. Sabello. Illustrator alternative that supports CMYK. I have nothing for you there, Sabello. The only Illustrator alternative I know, I don't know if it supports CMYK. I don't really, I'm not a graphics person, so I know Inkscape. I don't think Inkscape has CMYK support. Or if it does, I don't think it's had it that long. As of 2021, looking at Stack Exchange, Inkscape does not support CMYK. That's what I was thinking. I don't know if they're working on it or... Yeah. I don't know if, you guys in the chat, because some of you guys probably do work with a lot of these graphics tools that I don't. I don't do a lot with artwork and graphics and stuff on Linux. The only thing I ever use is GIMP. I do, just some rudimentary stuff with GIMP, creating channel artwork, thumbnails and stuff. Illustrator I never play with. I know Krita is another very popular tool out there people use, create artwork with. I've never used Krita. All right. Let's see if I can catch up on some of the chat I missed here. Let's see. Juan, he writes in, "Hey DT, thanks for all. And what distro would you recommend for professional work?" That's very general, professional work. That you didn't tell me your profession, right? So any Linux distribution would be fine for professional work because again, they're all essentially the same. But if you're wanting something that already is pre-set up with specific tools, ships with certain tools for your job, your profession, then you'd have to let me know what that is. But at the end of the day, they're all the same, right? Again, it's all the same kernel, same core utils, same shell. They're all the same under the hood. So they're all going to support the same hardware because the kernel, the hardware support, right? So they all use the same hardware. They all support the same subset of hardware. It's all the same, right? There's so many distros, and they're definitely different. But that difference that you see is typically the outside shell, right? That's the clothes that distribution is wearing. But up underneath, that's the same person. That's the distro. Zero Linux. Hey DT. What's up, Zero? Hope all is well. I know in Lebanon it has to be extremely late. I'm surprised that you made the stream. Photopea is a nice alternative to Photoshop. That was Martin that writes that in. I have actually never used Photopea. Although I see people talk about it. I don't know much about it. Yeah, we're probably going to stream another 15 minutes or so. So I usually plan these out to be about an hour and a half. So those of you that have any questions and comments you want to get them in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So they are recorded forever in YouTube lore. Let's see, have you tried Temple OS DT? Yeah, I think I tried it out on camera a few years back. Pretty sure I did a brief video looking at it. It's interesting. That's all I'll say on that. It's interesting. Yeah, it's 11 p.m. Yeah, in Lebanon. That's not that late then. I was thinking it would be later than that. I was thinking early a.m. Eric writes in. He says, "Hey DT, love your work. Have you ever considered using a computer with a RISC-V CPU? I wouldn't be against it. I would love for RISC-V to see more popularity, see more development. I think it's a neat architecture, neat idea. Let's see, DT, can we make a career with Linux? Many people do. I don't see why you couldn't. Hell, I've never worked in computers, system administration, IT, and I make a measly little career with Linux just making videos, right? It's not much of a career. I don't make that much, but this is not like a real job, right? You guys that are actually in IT and system administration, some of you guys can make the big bucks. So yeah, you absolutely can make a career with Linux. Go for it. Stitchy writes in, "Hey, great job. How often do you recommend updating packages, etc.? I also run Arch Linux B." That's probably meant to be Arco Linux B. Okay. I would try to update probably at least once a week. Depending on how many... I'm a little different because I've got so much stuff installed. I've got a ton of stuff installed on my computers. So if I go more than a week without updating, I'm going to have hundreds. I'm talking about 400, 500, 600 updates. If I go too long without updating, I don't like taking such a big update because the more packages that update, more likely they're going to break. I mean, they would break anyway, but when you have 500 packages during an update and something breaks, well, what was the one that caused the problem? Well, I've got 500 different packages that could have been the problem, right? When you take smaller updates that don't involve that many packages, it's a little easier to figure out what caused the problem. So, let's see. Feed the Gold. I make $240K a year getting Linux certified. Heck yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I need to get Linux certified if I make $240K a year. Point me to where I can take that test. DT, what do you think about using immutable distros like Silverblue as a daily driver? Yeah, I don't know Silverblue personally, but I would assume it would be just fine. The word immutable obviously means it doesn't change, right? That's what mutable is. It's changeable. Immutable never changes. So as far as stability, it should be rock solid stable. That's the point of the distribution. So why wouldn't it work as a daily driver? Should work just fine. And it'd be the same for things like Nix OS, which is a very popular Linux distribution these days, growing in popularity. A lot more people are seeing that kind of workflow, or that kind of style of distribution, that model of distribution, I should say, as being possibly the future. I don't know if it will ever see a day where all distributions kind of go in that direction, but I think Nix, has kind of changed the way people think about some of this stuff. Because Nix has been around, almost 20 years at this point, although it wasn't very popular until recently. But the package manager and the distribution both have been around for a while. I would say the first time I heard about Nix was probably 6, maybe 7 years ago, before starting this channel. Maybe the first time I'd heard about it was about 6, 7 years ago. And even then, it was kind of like, hey, heard about this Nix thing? Hardly anybody knew about it. Really, in the last 2 years, I would say Nix is, like, you see a lot of people using it now. People are actually starting to realize, hey, this is a cool model. It makes sense. It's stable. I think what keep a lot of people from using something like Nix is the installation process. Not user-friendly as far as it's a command line installation. You got to write a config file, or at least you did. The Nix guys recently completely revamped the installation process. Now, the installation of NixOS, if you want, you can still do that old school command line installation, but now it does ship with a Calamares installer. And I've actually tried it out in a virtual machine. The NixOS with the Calamares installer installs just fine. Yeah, Zero Linux. DT, some people say that they hate Linux because they spend more time trying to make it work than using it, versus Windows, where if you used correctly, it just works. And not enough hardware support. Well, the hardware support may have a point with hardware support, but usually the hardware support they're talking about is really niche stuff. There's really not much hardware that shouldn't run on Linux. The stuff that really bugs people is the gaming crowd really hates that a lot of their RGB stuff, you know, their RGB keyboards, RGB mice, because they like the flashy lights and all bling and all that stuff. All of that stuff requires drivers. And the makers of that equipment, they typically only write Windows drivers, and there's nothing Linux can do about that, right? That's the maker of that hardware. You know, these people need to complain to the manufacturers of that hardware. Write Linux drivers for that crap. They probably won't, but complain to them. You know, let them know. If you don't let them know that there's people out there that need that stuff, then they're never going to make it. As far as you know, spending more time making Linux work than actually working on it, I guess that depends on the person. You know, that's when people see me, you know, because I get that comment all the time because people see what I do on Linux. I'm a nerd. You know, I enjoy messing around with config files and stuff, and that's why I do it, because I like it. If you don't like it, you don't have to do that. My mom runs Linux. She doesn't even know it's Linux. She thinks it's another version of Windows, probably, right? She doesn't work on anything. She doesn't have to make it work. It just works. I've got her on, I think, Ubuntu 2004 or something. I don't even think I've upgraded her to like the last LTS. She's on the one before. It's still supported, but yeah. You don't have to work on, you don't have to configure your Linux and, you know, spend all that time customizing things and, you know, the way I do. If you don't want to, you just want a computer that works. Yeah, I can install Linux on a computer and give it to somebody. It just works. They're fine. I've done it hundreds of times with friends and family. Just put a distro on their old Windows laptop, no longer working. Here, let me put Linux Mint on it, or whatever, you know, one of the Ubuntus, or, you know, some reasonable distribution. Linux Lite's one I often install on people's machines. I give it back to them. I never hear back from them. Never. As far as I don't get a call saying, hey man, this ain't working, or this is broke. No, usually, you know, I'll see them a few months, year down the road. Hey, how's that laptop working? Oh, still using it. Works fine, right? If they happen to show me that machine, typically it still is running the default wallpaper, the default icon set, right? They haven't changed anything. It's just working. It just depends on the user. All right, guys. I'm going to give it about another 5 minutes here, and then we're going to call it a day. DT, do you run any false ROMs on your phone? I don't. Again, if you weren't here at the beginning of the stream, I don't like phones. I have a phone. I don't like playing on phones. I don't like phone operating systems. I don't like phones, the hardware, as far as I don't like the idea of carrying one around on you all the time. I don't like the idea of having a microphone on you all the time. I don't like the idea of feeling like you have to be connected all the time. I think phones are dangerous pieces of equipment. No, I just don't like them. Because I don't like them, I'm not that interested in the software on phones. That's why a lot of people ask me about phone operating systems, or sometimes programs that run on phone, you know, mobile applications. But I don't spend enough time with phones to really judge any of that stuff appropriately. I have a mobile phone. I have an Android phone. And I use it to make calls, occasionally to send a text message or two. I don't run any applications on it. You know, I take that back. I will open the browser occasionally if I needed to do a quick search for something. The browser I run on it is Brave. I don't run Chrome on it. But no, I don't like all the chat clients and social media stuff. You know, all the stuff that people do on their phones. They game on their phones. I don't have any of that stuff on my phone. So I just don't play on my phone. I've told this story before, but of course we've got new subscribers that probably don't know much about me in the past. But I actually, until about 6 or 7 years ago, I bought my first cell phone. 6 or 7 years ago. We're talking 2015, 2016. Way after, I mean, we're talking 20 years after everybody else was buying cell phones and had to have a phone on them. For 20 years, I refused to have one. And I was proud of it because I could see where things were going. I didn't want to be that way. Finally, I bought a phone because right before starting this YouTube channel, I had a job. And I was a supervisor at my job. I had to be on call 24/7 sometimes. And they had to have a way to get in touch with me no matter what. I had to have a phone. I had to have a cell phone. If it had not been for that job, I would not have a phone right now because now I don't have no need for one. But I have it. It's already paid for. So, as far as the hardware, you know, the service, obviously, I have to pay for every month. But hey, DT, have you heard of Aspirite? It's an open source program that is the best tool for pixel art. It is essentially what Blender is for 3D modeling. I have not heard of Aspirite. Sounds cool. Of course, Blender sounds cool too. I don't know how to use Blender as far as for 3D modeling. I wish I did. No, there are so many things I would love to be able to learn, but I know they would take a long time. We were talking graphics stuff earlier. Inkscape. Don't know how to use Inkscape. Krita. Don't know how to use Krita. Blender. There's a lot of stuff in Blender, you know, with the 3D modeling and animation stuff. Don't know how to use any of that stuff. And I'd love to learn it, but I know it would be a deep dive. It would take weeks or months to actually learn any of that stuff, much less all of it. It's been years trying to learn it all. You have to pick and choose your battles, and for me, I have to pick and choose the ones that interest me. I know, like the graphics related stuff, I probably wouldn't be any good at it, and it would never be useful for anything in my life. So I just kind of have to let some of these dreams die. I would love one day to be like a Blender master, but I know it's just not in the cards. Erjan, he writes in, have you started Farscape yet? Not yet. I think I talked to you the other day, or you messaged me on Patreon, and we're asking about Farscape. One of the problems with Farscape is it's not on Netflix. I do have a Netflix account. I was watching a different series the other day. I was in the middle of a different series the last time you asked me about Farscape. But now I finished that series, and I noticed that the latest season of Cobra Kai is on Netflix. I haven't watched that yet. So I probably got to check out the latest season of Cobra Kai on Netflix. But Farscape, yeah, I don't know. I may just have to purchase it. I was hoping I could find it on Netflix, because Netflix has so much of those sci-fi series, you know, like all the Star Trek series pretty much on Netflix, and Stargate SG-1 I know was on Netflix, which I rewatched like all 13 seasons or whatever they had. So a bunch of seasons of Stargate. I've rewatched all of them at one time or another on Netflix. Some of the other stuff. There's a bunch of that sci-fi stuff, but for whatever reason, Farscape is not on it. I've got to, I guess I'm going to have to locate another source for Farscape. Hey DT, what's your opinion on the Pantheon desktop? It's fine. It's like many other desktop environments, as far as the menu system and window controls, a floating window manager. It's like a bunch of other ones we have on Linux as far as desktop environments. As far as the workflow and the feel and all. Yeah, I've got no problems with it. It's not something I personally would use, but I have put elementary OS on friends and family machines. I was talking about distributions that I've put on people's machines. They bring me their laptops or whatever. And yeah. And in the past, I have put elementary on some machines, and it tends to work for people. So, hey DT, do you take vacations? I have not taken a vacation since starting this YouTube channel, which is one of the things I actually was planning on taking like a week or maybe 2 weeks about, 3 months ago. And I was actually starting to get ahead on some video content. I was pre-recording some stuff, batch recording, and, but not immediately publishing these videos, holding them back a little bit. And I was going to space them out over like a 2-week period. And I was going to take a 2-week vacation. I was going to go out of state, thinking about, a trip I wanted to take. And I got the videos recorded. I actually got ahead enough time. And, really pushed myself to get ahead. Also to keep pushing out new content every day, but then also record to get ahead. And I got sick, probably because I overworked myself doing that. I caught COVID, right? The second time I had COVID. So that 2-week vacation turned into I was sick in bed for a couple of weeks, but I had some videos to cover the COVID. But I didn't take the vacation, so I screwed up on that. Let's see. Tape House. DT, love you. You're handsome. And your t-shirt's cool too. Your headphones, your walls, even your brown door rocks. Man, I gotta say, I am proud of that door. Yeah, so now we're getting into the asinine comments. Well, let's give it another 2 minutes. Anybody got a last word they want to get it in now. So 2 minutes, we're shutting down the stream. Hey DT, can you do more live shows? These are great. Yeah, I could do more. I haven't been doing them again because I typically record from the office. The live streams at the office are kind of shaky because the network is not great at the office. It's not horrible, but it's not great. I have better internet at home, so. But yeah, I may do more of these live streams from home. I used to do live streaming on a much more regular basis when I started the channel. 4 or 5 years ago, I would do somewhat regular live streams, and then I quit doing them. I know a lot of people like the lives. For me, I've always preferred the pre-recorded content, just me personally, I think it fits my style better, but I don't mind chatting with you guys live on camera either. So yeah, I'll plan another live stream sometime in the near future. I definitely need to do more than what I've been doing because this live stream was the first live stream I've done. If we discount the monthly chat with patrons, right? Just me on a live stream. It's been many months since I've tried to do one. So yeah, I need to do them more often. Let's see. Tom, how many distros did you try in your life? Hundreds. Not even kidding. Just check the channel, right? I've done 1,300 videos on YouTube, and probably 300 or 400 of them are distro reviews. Of course, there's going to be some duplicates in there, but a lot of them are the first time I've ever tried this distro. Haven't heard of this distro, right? And then, of course, I probably tried some that you guys have never seen on camera because I've tried many distros in the last 15 years that are no longer around. Right, that are dead distributions. So obviously you don't see videos about them. But yeah, literally hundreds. Yeah, I've tried. Let's see. DT, I've been trying to use Unity in Qtile. It always ends up crashing. Also in Xmonad when moving windows around, docking them. Have you experienced something like this? I have not done anything with the Unity game engine because I don't use Unity. Never tried to create a game, so. But what I would suggest is there is a YouTuber named Zaney, Z-A-N-E-Y. He does the Unity game engine on Linux, makes games with Unity on Linux, and he uses tiling window managers like DWM. He's used Qtile and Xmonad in the past, ask him. I will link to his channel. So Zany here. Which I've actually appeared on his channel a couple of times. We've done a couple of podcasts together. He's interviewed me a couple of times. Check those out. But he does game development. I will post a link to his channel. And if you search on his channel for DistroTube, I didn't realize this when I suggested this, but we have done a couple of collaboration videos here in the past, so check those out as well. Some cool videos, cool chats about Linux, and specifically tiling window managers, programming, things like that. All right, well, I think we're gonna call that a live stream, fellas. Yeah, let's play on Game Says. Thanks for all the great work. Appreciate that. I want to thank all of you guys, and appreciate some of the congratulations from those of you on the congratulate me on the 200K mark. Yeah, that was a cool mark. Got past 200K, I think, yesterday or so. And again, coming up on 50K soon on Odyssey, which I'm really proud of. It's just crazy when you think about that. That's 250,000 people subscribed, for really nerdy content. So I would have never guessed when I started making these videos anybody would be interested. And then once people kind of got interested, you get some views. It's like, well, there'll be a ceiling to this, because it'll get to a point where there's only so many Linux nerds out there. How many do you think there are? 10, 20, 100 maybe? But I don't know. I think this is a sign that Linux is growing. I really do. I think the fact that Linux channels now are bigger than they were when I started. 5 years ago, you didn't see channels that had really 50K subscribers. That'd have been a rare thing. Now you've got Linux channels that many of them 100K or more, right? And I think that's a sign. Again, I think that's a sign that more and more people are running Linux. More and more people are interested in Linux. I think it's a sign that free and open source software is winning, and I love it. On that note, I had a super chat there from Naga. I appreciate that. He didn't leave a comment or a question, but I do thank you for the super chat. Before I go, I want to thank the patrons of the channel as well. So I'm going to thank these folks here: Dustin, Gabe, James, Matt, Maxim, Mimit, Michael, Mitchell, Paul West, Why You Bald Homie, the best name ever, Alan, Armor Dragon, Chuck, Commander, Dayokai, Dylan, Greg, Marstrom, Jan, Angus, Leonard, Paul, Peace Arch, and Fedora, Polytech, Realities for Less, for Profit, Stephen Tools, Devler, and Willie. You guys didn't think I could do that live, did you? But I got those names out. These guys, they're the producers of this episode. They're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. And of course, I'd like to thank each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to say all their names. There's just too dang many, and I know I'd screw that up, but I will show their names on the screen. One name I want to highlight, the Swedish Linux. I left his name off on this list, last time I did a stream. He's on there now, the Swedish Linux. I think he's got a YouTube channel as well. Check him out. And other than that, I'm good, guys. I'm not in camera frame, but I'm going to say peace.